pedigree pups. Mrs. Anderson was accustomed to seeing 2 or 3 pups in a poodle litter. Lola gave birth to 6 this time. Perhaps it was King's unrelenting love-making to Lola that had caused this anomaly. The fragrance of Lola in heat was so utterly compelling that each time he thought their love-making was coming to an end, King somehow felt another burst of energy inside his beagle heart. The 6 puppies that emerged from her small frame surprised Lola. She was sad when number 4 lay there, unmoving, after he emerged. After she ate the small bag of afterbirth that had protected him in the womb, she licked him again and again, trying to bring him back to life. Mrs. Anderson watched, praying for some movement. But after half an hour and not a sign of life, she gently pulled the small pup away from Lola and wrapped him in a white towel. Later that night she would burn his remains and scatter them in the pastures outside her farmhouse. She would look up at the crescent moon and pray for the little dog that had never known the world beyond his mother's womb. Lola felt an intangible sadness come over her as she saw her pup disappear from sight. But she could not be sad for long. The convulsions in her stomach started again, and soon enough another beautiful puppy emerged into the world. Nelson was largely light brown or apricot with splashes of white, particularly over his face. A dark brown circle surrounded the one eye and a white circle surrounded the other. From an early age, this gave all the impression that he was wide-eyed and fascinated by the world. But at the time of his birth, his eyes were firmly closed, as they would be for the first week of his life. His nose twitched excitedly as the smell of grass filled his world for the first time. He felt his mother lick him, and her scent, too, filled his senses, rich and comforting. Mrs. Anderson entered the room again, noticed the new puppy, and patted him ever so gently on his small head. And so he whiffed a human being for the first time. And that smell, although complex, was also warm and good. This was a lot to happen to such a young soul in the first minutes of his life, and Nelson was suddenly struck by an overwhelming hunger. His mother saw the quivers in his small body and those of her other pups. She pushed, and her final puppy, Nelson's little sister, emerged into the world, wriggling and sniffing. Gently, Mrs. Anderson placed each of the puppies near Lola's 6 nipples, and they wriggled inward toward their first meal. The first week of Nelson's life passed in a blur. As the days went by, his nose explored with greater and greater skill the scents around him. Then hunger would strike again. Sometimes Lola would be sleeping when he crawled toward her, desperate for sustenance. He did not know, of course, how exhausted she was from feeding her 5 surviving puppies. Secretly, Mrs. Anderson was very concerned. Lola was a small dog by any standard. Once, many years before, another poodle owned by Mrs. Anderson, Lola's grandmother, had developed a severe calcium deficiency from feeding a large litter, and it died on the way to the emergency veterinary clinic in the small town of Nelson, New Hampshire, nearby. Mrs. Anderson had fed the remaining pups, including Lola's gorgeous mother, a pearly white poodle, with a bottle every 4 hours. Often, Nelson would wake up to Lola licking his stomach. He loved this, and he liked the smell of the warm liquid that seemed to flow from his own body after she did this. Its smell would never last for too long. He would whiff Mrs. Anderson close by and feel her hands on his body, and then most of the smell of his excrement would be gone. Nelson soon noticed that all of his brothers and sisters had a similar liquid that would come out of their bodies. While it smelled very similar to his own, his little nose soon identified very specific scents in theirs that allowed him to identify them. Sometimes when he suckled on his mother's nipples, he would notice a very similar but much more intense odor coming from her. It was pungent and strong and earthy. Sometimes Mrs. Anderson would take Lola outside for an hour or 2, and Nelson would quietly cry until this reassuring smell was close by again. Smell would always be the great and overwhelming presence that defined Nelson's perception of the world.